We're here continuing in the wonderful Song of Songs. Not only are we reading it, but we're writing it. And this song is the song of two become one. We're becoming like Him. As we behold Him, we reflect Him. We're being transformed into His image, that when you see us, you see Him. It's the history of experience of a bride with her beloved. And this is a new section of the song. We finished off such a high note in chapter 5, verse 1, and it seemed like even the song could have ended there. There's such a sweet relationship, and the beloved was satisfied, inviting his friends. Let me read chapter 5, verse 2 with this new section. I sleep, but my heart, my heart wakes. It is the voice of my beloved that knocks, saying, Open to me, my sister, my love, my dove, my undefiled. For my head is filled with dew, and my locks with the drops of the night. Every new section of the Song of Song, we have many questions. And how long since the old section? Was there a long period that transpired? But the main question for us to ask, and we ask this in the presence of the beloved, where am I? Where am I in this song? Am I in chapter 1, 2, 3? Am I here in chapter 5, verse 2, beginning a new section, or have I been here for a while? Where am I with Him? This is the question. Is this new part or new section of the song my revelation and my experience? In this verse, she says she sleeps. Is this sleep a decline? Is she beginning to become settled or complacent? Or is this a sleep as a death to everything that is not Him? She sleeps to everything, but she's awake to Him. We covered that little section last week, and we're going to continue on with just the part of the verse that goes, It is the voice of my beloved that knocks, saying, Open to me. So far we've seen, or she has seen, a revelation of the beloved Christ in glory. She's entered into such a high experience of Him where she's become a garden, and eventually He calls her His garden. Now she's called, in this verse, to know the man of sorrows. She's known the man of glory. Now she needs to know the man of sorrows. She was a garden of delight, becoming His garden. Now she needs to enter the Garden of Gethsemane. In Philippians 2, verse 5, it says, Let this mind be in you. And what was the mind? It's the mind that Christ, as God and man, emptied Himself, He humbled Himself, and He was obedient to death, even the death of a cross. In 1 Peter 4:1, Peter says, As Christ has suffered in the flesh, so arm yourselves with the same mind. We come to this section of the Word, and we want to know Him as the man of sorrows who is doing the will of the fathers. He was rejected, He was despised, but yet He did the will of the Father. In Gethsemane, He says, Not my will, but your will. It is the voice of my beloved that knocks. Though she's asleep, it says, I sleep, but my heart wakes. Her heart is in tune with His voice. She doesn't respond to just any voice, but only His. His voice is His response to her in her present condition and place. It's not just her seeking Him in this verse, but He's seeking to draw her to Himself, to draw her into who He is, into a new revelation and experience of himself. It is the voice of my beloved that knocks. She's affected by his voice, but not totally and not quickly. And it's not merely a sound, but there's a distinct expression to his voice. And it testifies that faith is operating in her, because faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of Christ. So the wonderful bride here has faith operating in her, because she recognizes the voice, the word, the speaking of her beloved. It is the voice of my beloved that knocks. This isn't the first experience of his voice. She's familiar with his voice, and in chapter 2, verse 8, it's the voice of her beloved, and he was behind a wall, and there was a window there. And at this time, she was living in seclusion. She was protecting her personal pleasure of him. He was outside of the wall and wanted to move on with her, and so his voice is to come away. So in a similar way, here it's the voice of her beloved, and he's outside knocking and calling, open to me. So it's these two sections show that his voice was a voice of calling, a voice of bringing her where he is, and to bring her to be the same as he is. It is the voice of my beloved that knocks. This phrase, my beloved, is used 24 times in the Song of Songs, and it's used 7 times in this chapter, because he is too precious to her. My beloved. She's loved him so much that she calls him personally that he is her beloved. It's good for us to say, you are my Lord. You are my Christ. You are my beloved. You are my first love. It is the voice of my beloved that knocks. It seems like the voice is knocking. And this word knocking means to beat, or press severely, or beat violently. If you read Revelations 3:20, again, the wonderful beloved Christ is knocking at the door of the believers as the church. The voice, it clearly expresses an appeal, but the knocking, it really demands attention. When someone calls, you can hear their voice and you can hear what they want. But when somebody begins to knock, it just grabs your attention, and it needs some type of quick response. And this knocking is just showing the Lord is approaching. He's knocking on the door of a heart that belongs to him. Actually you could say that even there's a knock in his voice. It is the voice of my beloved that knocks. In Matthew 7:8, we are the ones knocking. It says we need to ask, we need to seek, and we need to knock, that it would be open. And this is on our part. In Revelations 3:20, we first hear his voice, and then there's a knock. He begins to knock on his part. He wants to gain entrance. This is why he's knocking. He wants to come in. He wants to be given access, and he needs more space. He needs more freedom. In 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 11, this word open is used, and it is equivalent to be enlarged. When he knocks and he wants the door open, he wants her to be enlarged. She needs to open and be enlarged in her union and fellowship with him. It is the voice of my beloved that knocks. What is the door that he's knocking on? The door could be our memory, recollections of him. Sometimes when we remember him, it's as a knock. He's drawing us to himself. It's a knock on our feelings. the sweet feelings we have of him. It's a knock upon our conscience that nothing would be between. It's a knock on our affections that there would be this mutual love. It's a knock on our thoughts, on the revelations of him. His knocking, he's trying every door or every part of the door of our heart so he can come in. It is the voice of my beloved that knock. How does he knock? He knocks by his word. Many times we read his word and we sense he's knocking. Open to me. By providence in our environment. Many times a suffering environment or even a blessed environment, we recognize the intimacy with our beloved Christ as he's knocking. The Spirit's unveiling. Many times when we sing a hymn or read the word or fellowship, the Spirit is unveiling and it becomes a knocking in our life to further open to him and let him have the freedom, the full space in our being. Or it could be by another lover of Christ. Many times I've sensed what somebody fellowshiped with me or shared with me, and they might not have known, but it was a knocking of the Lord upon my heart. It was a real speaking. It was the voice of my beloved knocking, open to me. He wanted to gain further entrance into my being. It is the voice of my beloved that knocks. His knock and his voice is a fresh call to follow him. When you go through the book of Jonah, it says that Jonah was called twice. Called one time, and then the knocking came again, and he was called again. When the disciples were in the garden, it says 3 times he came back to them. 3 challenges, 3 knocks. In the Song of Songs, when you read through up to where we're at right now, there are 3 callings. Maybe more, but I'll just list 3. In chapter 2, verse 10, his calling said to come away. He looked through the window. She was behind the wall, and he called to her, come away. Come out of that place. Although it's so sweet, you've enjoyed something so precious, come away, because I have something more for you. In chapter 4, verse 8, he didn't say come away, but he says come with me. He was on a journey, and he wanted her to journey with him in new experiences. He wanted her to know the heights of the ascended life with him, to know him in the ascended life and look from the mountains, looks from the high places. Now in chapter 5, verse 2, he calls again, and this calling is open to me. In chapter 2, verse 10, it was to come away, and here it's to open. Open to me. He begins to call and touch her disposition. Open to me. Here it's not a wrong position as in chapter 2, because her position was wrong. He says, come away. But here it's open to me. It's a wrong disposition. Something's wrong within. So he wants her not to be closed within her being, to open to him. No obstacle. He wants her to be set free within, to be enlarged, to let him have the freedom in her. Her condition needs to match his condition. Open to me. Joined, she needs to be joined to him in her disposition and in her outlook. She is not forced to open. When he says open to her, he's not forcing her. She must voluntarily open to his voice and his knock. This is her choice to follow him further. Has the Lord been knocking in your heart? Has he been knocking in your life? Does he want you to go further? Does he want you to be enlarged? Don't settle for what you have of Him. Don't settle in your Christian life in maybe a success or an attainment. Don't settle. Lord Jesus, we're here because we want to go on with you. We want to forget the things which are behind and lay hold of all that you are. Lord, your voice and your knock, we open to you. We come away, we come with you, but every inward part of our heart, we just want open to you, that our disposition would match you, to become your bride for eternity.